Hollywood's golden age brought us unforgettable stars and larger-than-life legends. But behind the glitz and glamour, many of these icons did something far more courageous than acting. They put their careers on hold to serve in World War II. Some stormed beaches, others flew dangerous combat missions, and a few operated under deep secrecy. Their stories aren't always taught in schools or shown on the big screen, but they're filled with bravery, sacrifice, and surprises. In this video, we're counting down 20 Golden Age actors. Some you'll expect, others that will shock you, who served during the most devastating conflict in human history. You won't believe how close some of them came to death, or how little the world knew about what they did. Let's dive into these heroic, real-life roles. These aren't just stories of patriotism, they're tales of grit, loss, survival, and transformation. Each actor on this list carried the weight of war long after the cameras started rolling again. Number 1. Christopher Lee. Before Christopher Lee became the towering presence behind Count Dracula and Saruman, he served in one of the most shadowy corners of World War II. Born in England, Lee joined the Royal Air Force but was soon seconded to the ultra-secret Special Operations Executive, a clandestine group responsible for espionage, sabotage, and supporting resistance movements behind enemy lines. While the full extent of his missions remains classified to this day, Lee hinted at the grim nature of his service. When asked if he knew what it was like to stab a man in the back, he chillingly replied, "Yes, I do." He often declined interviews on his wartime role, citing the Official Secrets Act. But in rare moments, he would let fragments slip. "I've seen men die right in front of me," he once said. "So many that I've become almost hardened to it." It's rare for an actor to carry real combat into their roles. But Lee's imposing presence wasn't just talent, it was lived experience. Every time he portrayed a villain, he drew from memories that Hollywood never dared script. Even Peter Jackson, director of The Lord of the Rings, said Lee was the only cast member who didn't need coaching on how someone sounds when stabbed, because he had actually heard it in real life. His time in the shadows of war became the foundation for some of the most iconic roles in cinematic history. Number 2. Kirk Douglas. Long before he became a Hollywood titan in films like Spartacus and Paths of Glory, Kirk Douglas was just Izur Danielovich, the son of poor Russian immigrants. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1941, eager to serve. He was commissioned as an ensign and trained as a communications officer, eventually assigned to a patrol craft designated for anti-submarine warfare. Douglas's ship escorted convoys across the Atlantic, braving the threat of German U-boats in frigid, unforgiving waters. His job involved managing sensitive communications under extreme pressure, and he quickly earned the respect of his crewmates for his resolve. In 1944, Douglas was honorably discharged after sustaining injuries in service. Though details about the incident remain vague, he spoke openly later in life about how his time in the Navy shaped his understanding of courage, leadership, and pain. That grit carried over into his acting career, where he often played men wrestling with moral dilemmas and physical danger. It's hard to imagine the star of Spartacus hunched over a naval console, decoding messages under threat of enemy fire. But that's exactly what he did. Douglas didn't just play heroes, he lived as one before ever stepping onto a movie set. Number 3. Mel Brooks. Known for his sharp wit and boundary-pushing comedies like Blazing Saddles and The Producers, Mel Brooks was once a teenage soldier tasked with one of the war's most dangerous jobs: defusing landmines. Drafted into the U.S. Army at just 17, Brooks became a combat engineer, and he was sent to Europe where he saw action during the infamous Battle of the Bulge. While he would later make the world laugh, his wartime role was no joke. He was on the front lines, disarming explosives under freezing, chaotic conditions. Brooks often joked about his time in the Army, saying, "I was a combat engineer. Isn't that ridiculous? The two things I hate most are combat and engineering." But beneath the humor lay real courage. He was responsible for clearing paths for advancing troops, knowing one wrong move could cost him his life. Many of his fellow engineers never made it back. Despite the trauma of war, Brooks emerged with a deep appreciation for life and an ability to find humor even in the darkest situations. It's a testament to his resilience that he used those experiences not to dwell in tragedy, but to fuel some of the most beloved comedies of all time. Before he ever stepped on a soundstage, Mel Brooks had already survived one of history's most brutal wars, one landmine at a time. Years later, he would still reflect on those memories with a mix of gravity and gratitude, acknowledging that his time in the service had forever shaped his worldview. Even as he made millions laugh, a part of him remained that 17-year-old soldier dodging death in Europe. Number 4. Clark Gable. By the early 1940s, Clark Gable was already crowned the King of Hollywood, thanks to blockbuster hits like Gone with the Wind. But when his beloved wife, actress Carole Lombard, died tragically in a plane crash while returning from a war bond tour in 1942, something in Gable changed. Devastated and seeking purpose, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces at the age of 41, well beyond the typical draft age. Refusing special treatment, he trained as an aerial gunner and took part in real combat missions over Europe with the 351st Bomb Group. His primary assignment was to fly 5 missions so he could help create a wartime propaganda film titled Combat America, meant to recruit airmen and boost morale. But Gable didn't stay on the sidelines. He flew in B-17 bombers under enemy fire, capturing first-hand footage while simultaneously manning a gun turret. His bravery caught the attention of both Allied forces and the Nazis. Adolf Hitler reportedly offered a reward to anyone who could capture him alive and bring him to Berlin. Gable returned home as a major, forever changed by what he had seen. Though he resumed his acting career, he was more reserved, more grounded. A man who had traded scripts for survival. The King of Hollywood didn't just play romantic heroes, he became one, high above enemy territory with bullets flying past his plane. Number 5. Charlton Heston. Before he parted the Red Sea in The Ten Commandments or raced chariots in Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston was a 21-year-old man enlisting in the U.S. Army Air Forces during the height of World War II. In 1944, he joined the service as a radio operator and aerial gunner on B-25 Mitchell bombers. He was stationed in the remote and treacherous Aleutian Islands of Alaska, a chain known for its brutal weather and strategic importance in defending against potential Japanese attacks. Heston served with the 77th Bombardment Squadron, where flights were often delayed or derailed by fog, freezing temperatures, and gale force winds. As a crew member, he was responsible for maintaining communications mid-flight and defending the aircraft during patrols and reconnaissance missions. These were no easy tasks. Conditions were harsh, the missions long, and the threat of enemy fire was very real. But Heston never backed down, and his time in the service helped forge the commanding presence he would later bring to the silver screen. Though he rarely spoke at length about his military years, Heston credited the discipline and teamwork he learned in uniform with shaping his approach to acting and leadership. When he returned home in 1946, he used the GI Bill to study drama at Northwestern University, a decision that would launch one of Hollywood's most epic careers. Number 6. James Garner. Long before he became the charming rogue in Maverick or the street-smart detective in The Rockford Files, James Garner was just a determined teenager looking for a way out. At only 16, he lied about his age to join the U.S. Merchant Marine near the end of World War II. He served aboard ships navigating dangerous waters in the Pacific and Atlantic, often under threat from enemy submarines and aircraft. Life aboard was grueling, long hours, rough seas, and constant risk. Garner also battled chronic seasickness, but he endured, proving his toughness even as a boy. After the war, he returned to civilian life for a short time, but his service was far from over. When the Korean War broke out, Garner was drafted into the U.S. Army and assigned to the 24th Infantry Division. He fought on the front lines as a rifleman in some of the war's most brutal conditions. He was wounded twice, once by friendly fire from U.S. fighter jets, and again either by a landmine or shrapnel. Reports differ. For his injuries and bravery, he was awarded 2 Purple Hearts, although bureaucratic errors delayed the second one for decades. Despite the violence and trauma he experienced, Garner returned with a quiet strength that would come to define his screen presence. He never glamorized his service, but carried himself with the authenticity of someone who had truly been there. Number 7. Tony Curtis. Before becoming a silver screen heartthrob in films like Some Like It Hot and Spartacus, Tony Curtis was just a teenager from the Bronx, fueled by a sense of duty. At only 17, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1943, deeply moved by the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was assigned to the USS Proteus, a submarine tender tasked with repairing and supplying submarines throughout the Pacific theater, a vital but often overlooked aspect of the war effort. Curtis served as a signalman, trained in visual communications like Morse code and semaphore flags, a job that required focus and precision under pressure. His most unforgettable moment came on September 2, 1945. From the deck of the USS Proteus, anchored in Tokyo Bay, he witnessed the formal Japanese surrender aboard the USS Missouri, the moment World War II officially ended. It was a front-row seat to history that few could ever imagine, and it left a lasting impact on the young sailor. After the war, Curtis used the GI Bill to study acting in New York before heading to Hollywood, where his good looks and screen presence quickly landed him a contract with Universal Pictures. But beneath the charm and charisma was a man shaped by service and sacrifice. He may have become famous for his roles in romantic comedies and action dramas, but Tony Curtis never forgot the weight of what he saw in the Pacific, and it gave his performances a surprising depth that audiences may not have realized. Number 8. Paul Newman. Paul Newman's piercing blue eyes became one of his trademarks in classics like Cool Hand Luke and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But they also kept him from his original military dream. Enlisting in the U.S. Navy in 1943, Newman had hoped to become a pilot through the Navy's V-12 training program, but a routine physical revealed he was colorblind, ending those aspirations. Undeterred, he stayed in the service and became a radio operator and rear gunner on torpedo bombers in the Pacific Theater. Newman was stationed aboard the USS Bunker Hill, a prominent aircraft carrier active in the final stages of the war. His most defining wartime moment didn't come in battle, but through an unexpected twist of fate. Just before his squadron was scheduled to participate in the Okinawa campaign, Newman's pilot developed an ear infection, grounding their plane. That delay likely saved both their lives. On May 11, 1945, while they remained ashore, the USS Bunker Hill was struck by 2 kamikaze planes in one of the war's deadliest attacks, killing 393 men. Newman would later reflect on the eerie timing and how close he came to becoming just another name on a memorial. After being discharged in 1946, Newman returned to civilian life, but the experience never left him. It instilled a sense of perspective and humility that would shape not just his acting, but also his philanthropic efforts. To many, he was a Hollywood legend, but to himself, he was always the lucky man who never boarded that flight. Number 9. Tony Bennett. Long before he became one of America's most beloved crooners, known for timeless hits like I Left My Heart in San Francisco, Tony Bennett was an infantryman in the thick of World War II. Drafted into the U.S. Army in 1944 at just 18, he was assigned to the 63rd Infantry Division. He saw brutal combat on the front lines in France and Germany during the war's final months, a period marked by intense fighting, bitter cold, and staggering casualties. Bennett didn't just face danger from enemy fire, he also experienced the injustice of military segregation. After he dared to have lunch with a black friend in defiance of a superior's racist orders, he was demoted and reassigned to grave-digging duty. The incident deeply affected him and helped shape his lifelong commitment to civil rights and social justice. Despite the mistreatment, Bennett carried on and, after the German surrender, was transferred to the Special Services Unit, where he began singing for fellow troops, an early glimpse of the performer he would become. The horrors he witnessed in Europe never left him. He later said that his experiences made him a lifelong pacifist and gave him a deep appreciation for every opportunity he had after the war. Tony Bennett didn't just survive combat. He found a way to rise above it, turning pain into passion and using his voice not just to entertain, but to inspire. Number 10. Henry Fonda. By the time the United States entered World War II, Henry Fonda was already a respected actor with films like The Grapes of Wrath under his belt. But when war came, Fonda didn't hesitate. In 1942, at the age of 37, well past the age of most recruits, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. He reportedly said, "I don't want to be in a fake war in a studio," making it clear he'd rather serve in the real one. He began as a quartermaster third class aboard the USS Satterlee, a destroyer operating in the Atlantic. Later, he was transferred to the Pacific Theater, where he served as an intelligence officer. His responsibilities included briefing pilots and helping plan reconnaissance missions, critical tasks in a theater known for its complex island-hopping campaigns and intense naval battles. His leadership and dedication earned him the Bronze Star, one of the military's highest honors for meritorious service in a combat zone. Fonda rarely spoke about his military service, preferring to let his actions speak for themselves. But those years clearly influenced the kinds of roles he would take on afterward, men of integrity, conscience, and moral weight. When audiences saw him portray upright characters in films like 12 Angry Men, they weren't just watching a performance. They were seeing reflections of the man who once traded Hollywood acclaim for wartime duty. Number 11. Lee Marvin. Before Lee Marvin became famous for playing grizzled tough guys in films like The Dirty Dozen and Point Blank, he lived the role in real life as a United States Marine. In 1942, at just 18 years old, Marvin enlisted in the Marine Corps and was assigned to the 4th Marine Division, one of the most battle-hardened units in the Pacific. He saw intense frontline action, including during the brutal Battle of Saipan in 1944. During the fighting, Marvin was struck by machine gun fire that tore through his sciatic nerve and lower back. His injuries were severe enough to require a long recovery and ultimately led to his medical discharge. For his bravery and the wounds he sustained, Marvin received the Purple Heart, a medal he wore with quiet pride but rarely discussed publicly. The war left both physical and psychological scars, shaping the hardened demeanor and steely realism he brought to so many of his roles. He never glamorized violence, even though he portrayed it often on screen. Marvin once said that he acted the way he did because he had been there, and audiences could sense that authenticity. Lee Marvin didn't have to pretend to be a soldier or a survivor. He already was one. And every grim expression and worn-down character he played came from a place few actors ever truly understood. Number 12. Gene Autry. Known as the Singing Cowboy, Gene Autry was already a national sensation in the 1930s and early 40s, dominating radio, records, and film. But when World War II broke out, he didn't let fame keep him from doing his part. In 1942, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Autry enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces. At the time, he was at the height of his career, yet he volunteered without hesitation. After completing pilot training, Autry was commissioned as a flight officer and assigned to the Air Transport Command. His mission was as dangerous as it was critical. Flying over the Hump, the perilous air route across the eastern Himalayas used to transport supplies to Allied forces in China. These flights were among the most dangerous of the war, plagued by violent weather, high altitudes, mechanical failure, and constant threat of enemy attack. Autry flew countless missions, delivering cargo and support across one of the deadliest flight paths in military history. Despite the risks, he never stopped boosting morale. He brought his guitar along and performed for troops whenever possible, bridging his two worlds, entertainer and airman. Gene Autry didn't just play a cowboy hero on screen. In the skies above Asia, he became one for real. His decision to walk away from stardom to serve speaks volumes about the man behind the microphone. Number 13. David Niven. By the time World War II began, David Niven was already a Hollywood star with a suave, sophisticated screen presence. But unlike many foreign-born actors who stayed in the United States, Niven returned to Britain to fight. He rejoined the British Army, where he had previously served before his acting career took off, and was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Rifle Brigade. From there, he transitioned into the elite British Commandos and was later assigned to the highly secretive Phantom Signals Unit. This specialized group operated behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and relaying vital information from the battlefield back to headquarters. Niven participated in the D-Day landings and served throughout the European campaign. Though many of the unit's missions remain classified, what is known is that their work was extremely dangerous and often carried out under direct enemy fire. Niven was one of the few actors who not only served during the war, but did so in silence, never exaggerating or seeking praise for his contributions. After the war, he returned to Hollywood and starred in classics like Around the World in 80 Days and The Pink Panther, carrying with him the discipline and quiet confidence earned from his time in uniform. To his fans, he was charming and debonair. But beneath the tuxedos and effortless wit was a man who risked everything for his country and never asked for thanks. Number 14. Richard Burton. Richard Burton's commanding voice and Shakespearean gravitas made him one of the most acclaimed actors of his generation. But few know that his journey began not on the stage, but in military uniform. In 1944, at the age of 18, Burton joined the Royal Air Force during the final years of World War II. He trained as a navigator, a role that required intense academic rigor and a calm mindset under pressure. Although the war ended before Burton could see active combat, the experience still left a deep impression. The structure, discipline, and resilience he learned during his RAF training helped shape his personal and professional life. It also offered him something he had never had growing up in a poor Welsh mining town: a path forward. After the war, he received a scholarship to study at Oxford's Exeter College, where he honed his passion for literature and drama, under the mentorship of renowned scholar Neville Coghill. Burton would go on to deliver iconic performances in films like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and The Spy Who Came in from the Cold, but the emotional depth he brought to his roles was rooted in his early exposure to duty, pressure, and purpose. He may not have seen combat, but the RAF gave Richard Burton more than a uniform. It gave him direction, discipline, and a life-changing second act. Number 15. James Doohan. Long before he became known to millions as Montgomery Scotty Scott in Star Trek, James Doohan was a real-life war hero from Vancouver, Canada. When World War II broke out, he joined the Royal Canadian Artillery and quickly rose through the ranks. On D-Day, Doohan landed on Juno Beach with the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, part of the massive Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied France. That day, Doohan displayed remarkable bravery. He led his men across a minefield and took out 2 German snipers in the process. But that night, tragedy struck. Returning to his unit after nightfall, Doohan was accidentally shot 6 times by a nervous Canadian sentry. 4 bullets hit his leg. 1 struck his chest, stopped only by a silver cigarette case, and 1 severed his right middle finger. He survived, but the injury would stay with him for life. Remarkably, Doohan managed to conceal the missing finger throughout his acting career, cleverly hiding it during close-ups and camera angles. Doohan didn't often speak about his war experience, but when he did, it was with humility. He considered D-Day the most defining moment of his life, far more meaningful than any role he ever played. For fans who saw him as the unshakable chief engineer of the Starship Enterprise, it turns out Scotty didn't just beam others to safety. He fought for it in the mud, blood, and fire of Normandy. Number 16. Denolm Elliot. To many moviegoers, Denolm Elliot is best remembered as the affable doctor, Marcus Brody in the Indiana Jones films. But long before he became a familiar face on screen, Elliot was a young Royal Air Force officer, facing the horrors of war. In 1939, at the very start of World War II, he enlisted and trained as a navigator, a dangerous and essential role in the bomber crews over Europe. In 1942, during a night raid over Germany, Elliot's aircraft was shot down by enemy fire. He and the surviving members of the crew were captured by German forces and spent the rest of the war in a prisoner of war camp. Life in captivity was brutal, food was scarce, hope was rarer, and the psychological toll immense. But even under those grim conditions, Elliot found a lifeline: theater. He participated in amateur dramatic productions organized by fellow prisoners, a form of mental escape that would become the seed of his future career. After the war, he returned to England and studied acting at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. His experience as a POW gave his performances an emotional depth few could replicate. In roles like Mr. Emerson in A Room with a View, he displayed a quiet vulnerability that made his characters unforgettable. Elliot didn't just survive the war, he found meaning within it. And the man who once escaped through make-believe behind barbed wire went on to become one of Britain's most respected actors. Number 17. Eddie Albert. Best known for his charming role in the TV sitcom Green Acres, Eddie Albert had a past that was far more heroic than most fans ever realized. At the start of World War II, he joined the U.S. Coast Guard and later transferred to the U.S. Navy, where he served as a lieutenant. His most remarkable moment came in 1943 during the Battle of Tarawa in the Pacific, one of the bloodiest amphibious assaults of the war. While piloting a landing craft under heavy enemy fire, Albert witnessed dozens of wounded Marines stranded offshore, unable to make it back to safety. Disobeying orders to withdraw, he navigated through artillery and machine gun fire to rescue them. Over the course of several hours, he personally pulled 70 injured men from the surf and transported them to safety, making repeated trips under relentless attack. His actions went unpublicized for years, but those who served with him never forgot. He was later awarded the Bronze Star with a Combat V for valor. After the war, Albert resumed his acting career, often portraying affable, everyday characters. But beneath that easygoing screen presence was a man who had faced true chaos and chosen courage. Eddie Albert wasn't just a television star, he was a combat-tested hero whose real-life bravery far outshined anything he ever portrayed on screen. Number 18, Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy wasn't a movie star who went to war. He was a war hero who became a movie star. Born into poverty in Texas, he enlisted in the U.S. Army at just 17 after being turned down by the Marines and Navy for being too small. What followed was one of the most astonishing military records in American history. Murphy served with the 3rd Infantry Division and fought in some of the most dangerous battles of World War II, including in Italy, France, and Germany. By the end of the war, Murphy had received every combat award for valor available from the U.S. Army, including the Medal of Honor, 2 Silver Stars, and the Distinguished Service Cross. His most legendary act occurred in France in 1945, when he climbed onto a burning tank destroyer and single-handedly held off advancing German troops for over an hour, despite being wounded and nearly out of ammunition. After the war, Hollywood took notice. Murphy eventually starred in a series of westerns and war films, including To Hell and Back, a dramatized version of his own autobiography where he portrayed himself. But behind his fame was a man deeply affected by post-traumatic stress, long before it was widely understood. Audie Murphy didn't need to pretend to be a hero. He already was one. His story is a rare example of someone who earned every ounce of his stardom the hard way. Number 19. Walter Matthau. Most fans remember Walter Matthau for his sharp comedic timing in films like The Odd Couple and Grumpy Old Men. But before the laughs, he served with quiet grit during World War II. Born to a working-class family in New York City, Matthau joined the U.S. Army Air Forces and was assigned to the 8th Air Force in Europe. He served as a radio gunner on B-24 Liberator bombers, flying combat missions over Germany. These missions were anything but routine. Crews faced deadly anti-aircraft fire, enemy fighter planes, freezing temperatures at altitude, and mechanical failures that could cost lives. As a radio gunner, Matthau had to maintain communication with base while also manning a machine gun to defend the aircraft. He later recalled that many of his missions were terrifying, but he did his job without complaint, just like thousands of other young men far from home. After the war, Matthau used the GI Bill to study acting, first in New York and later in Hollywood. His gruff, world-weary charm would become his signature, but there was always something grounded behind it, a sense that he had seen the world at its worst and survived with his sense of humor intact. Walter Matthau never made a show of his service, but it was there, quietly shaping the depth and honesty that made him unforgettable on screen. Number 20, Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart is one of the most iconic faces of Hollywood's golden age, known for films like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and It's a Wonderful Life. But behind his gentle demeanor and everyman charm was one of the most accomplished military careers in American film history. In 1941, before the U.S. entered World War II, Stewart became the first major movie star to enlist, joining the Army Air Corps as a private and eventually becoming a bomber pilot. Stewart trained rigorously and rose through the ranks, ultimately commanding squadrons of B-24 bombers during dangerous missions over Nazi-occupied Europe. He flew 20 combat missions, including deep penetration bombing raids over Germany that were considered among the most perilous assignments in the war. His leadership and skill earned him numerous decorations, including 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, and the French Croix de Guerre. After the war, Stewart stayed active in the Air Force Reserve, eventually achieving the rank of Brigadier General, the highest-ranking actor in U.S. military history. He rarely spoke about his service, preferring not to glorify what he had witnessed. But those who served under him remembered him as humble, disciplined, and brave. To his fans, Jimmy Stewart was the symbol of American decency. To his fellow airmen, he was something even more rare, a true leader who never once had to act the part. These 20 actors weren't just heroes on screen, they were heroes in real life. Some were already famous when they enlisted, others became stars after returning from war. But they all share something deeper than celebrity, a willingness to put their lives on the line for something greater than themselves. Their sacrifices remind us that courage comes in many forms, sometimes in uniform, sometimes with a camera, and sometimes both. If you enjoyed learning about these incredible men, give this video a like, leave a comment telling us which story surprised you most, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold tales from Hollywood's past. Whether you're a fan of classic cinema or history itself, these stories deserve to be remembered, shared, and celebrated. Until next time, keep exploring the real lives behind the real legends.